Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to Development Discourse, where we ideate for Africa's development. My name is Patrick Okigbo. I'm the founding partner at Next Year. Next Year is a multi-competency advisory and investments firm that's really focused on, trying to help address Africa's most complex development challenges. My guest today is in many respects an anomaly. In a country where the easiest exit from the frustrations of bad government is a quiet withdrawal into private prosperity, he's done the reverse. He stepped back from the boardroom and directed his energy to, like accountability work, civic mobilization, and governance advocacy. He founded IBTC at a very early age of 33 and built it over nearly 2 decades into what became Stanbic IBTC, one of Nigeria's most respected financial institutions. He then walked away, and not into retirement, but towards something even more difficult, the work of building a Nigeria where we can hold the state to account. Through his ANAP Foundation and Go Nigeria, he has invested his efforts in budget monitoring, civic education, and electoral mobilization. He was one of the very few voices who publicly called for fuel subsidy removal as early as 2012, when that was not a very popular thing to say on national TV. Today, we're here to discuss yet something that the country has been trying to do and largely failing to achieve since our independence, which is, how do we reform our governance to work for the people? Atedo Peterside, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Patrick.
Excellent. Let me start with something that we can both agree on, which is this elite complicity problem. You've written and spoken about state capture, where the elite compete not to reform the system, but to control it. But the standard governance reform toolkit, that most development literature will point us to, we'll talk about things like transparency measures, open budget, using citizens' scorecards, but we've tried all of these things, but they seem not to work. If the diagnosis is really elite complicity, rather than elite ignorance, is transparency the right medicine to use to address this problem?
The problem goes way beyond transparency. Transparency presumes there's something that, if you just make it clearer, you've made some progress. Here, I think you have to start from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
People compete for elective office. When they are doing so, including some of the highest offices in the land, what is their motivation? See, because if somebody got into office largely to feather his own nest, or got into office largely to capture a significant size of portion of the state's resources to be enjoyed only by a narrow group, then indeed you can measure his success by how well he captured the state, because that's what he was working towards. Now, the point I'm making is that some of us were brought up right from age 10, doing civics in school and so on. We were brought up on the principle of public service or governance at the national level meant your focus was the greatest good for the greatest number. Now, fundamentally, 90% of Nigerian politicians reject that, or don't understand that, or don't accept that, or don't practice that. So to an extent, you get what you asked for. If you vote in people whose track record all their lives and their priority is not to achieve the greatest good for the greatest number of 230 million Nigerians, but to deliver some dividends to another group, usually them and mafia, a little cult, or indeed a section of their ethnic group, because it's never even the entire ethnic group. So if that is what people set out to achieve, then we have a bigger problem than just discussing things like transparency. Well, what we do need is to find a solution to this problem. And how are we, through what process, are we going to bring in leaders who accept that governance is about achieving the greatest good for the greatest number of Nigerians?
But the challenge here is, because what I've seen you do now is you've kind of put the onus on the people, right? You've claimed that, oh, if we keep voting in the wrong people, but what if we operate in a system where the people don't even vote in their leaders? You know, the votes don't count. You know, who should then bear this responsibility? Because it appears that all the levers are rigged against the people. If the elite control the INEC, control the judiciary, control the military, or the security forces, aren't the people really powerless?
You see, I think I'm one of those who actually believe that you get a government that you deserve. It's a different thing if you got what you consider to be a wrong government and you were resisting them, versus if you got what you thought was a wrong government and you are hailing them and telling them 3 bags full, sir. So the point I'm making is that you get what you wish for. Now, even when you talk about, oh, do the votes count, do the votes not count, I think it's most important thing you have to understand, we should all accept, and I'm sure you will agree, is that the larger the number and percentage of Nigerians, especially youths, who opt out of the electoral system, the easier you make it for the narrow percentage who want to rig the system to achieve their ends. I was brought up on a very simple principle. If you have an opponent and you are contesting something with him, a prize or the other, try and give him what he does not want. What people who are not democratic, what they want is for the majority of the Nigerians to opt out and give up on the system. When you give up on the system, you've given up your birthright. And the few who are unscrupulous and want to play it their own way, then take complete control. Why don't you do the opposite? You know what Nigeria is like in terms of demography. That's why some of us are moving up Nigeria youth. Do you know, Patrick, that the last election we were talking about, oh, somebody got 6 million votes, somebody got 8, somebody got 9. Call it what you like. Do you know that the day that Nigerian youth decide that this election or the next one, this is going to be it, and they all decide to come out on mass register, and they all decide to vote for one particular type of candidate, and on the day they deliver 25 million votes, that day is over. It doesn't matter how many police, because you've basically created a massive problem. So the point I'm making is that I am not going to kid anybody by saying that it's easy, because I don't believe in deceiving anybody. But I'm just saying that giving up is not in my DNA. And I don't expect young people to give up. If I should be, it's easier, like you said at the introduction, for people in my age group to give up and say, oh, our time is almost over, so let's leave it to the younger ones to do whatever they want to do. There's absolutely no reason why an 18-year-old should give up. In this next election, for instance, the number of Nigerians between age 18 and, let's say, 21 by election day, these will be people that didn't even vote last time. Do you know that if all of them alone register and turn out, there could be a problem? Also, I think very important that the more things get worse for the average Nigerian, I'm talking economics here, income distribution, poverty levels, whether we like it or not, don't let anybody try and gaslight you. 130 million Nigerians are poor. People start trying to change the definition of poverty. And so you are from the Southeast, I guess. If you go to the Southeast, you will know what they call poverty. If you go to almost any zone in Nigeria, you know what they call poverty. Indeed, what is more worrisome is that, I don't know if you have seen it, I saw the geographical breakdown of the poverty statistics. And then you realize that there's even a trend. It is not equally bad all over the country. Some parts of the country have it a lot worse than others. So it's actually possible It's actually possible when you look at those numbers that politicians or people who live in Lagos and Abuja don't really understand the gravity and the deprivation and the poverty in Sokoto or in Bayelsa or in Borno, because sometimes you have to see it to understand it. I like traveling, and when I see poverty in the South in particular, it frightens me. So some of the people whose lives, there are many people whose lives revolve between Lagos and Abuja. They don't really day-to-day see that level of poverty. They heard about it. So the point I'm trying to make is that we are getting to a level where the poverty alleviation should become a priority. But there's nothing on the horizon to give the impression that it's around the corner. And then to make matters worse, we insult people's intelligence by distributing a few gifts to a lucky few, a gift bag, and you give it to 10,000 people in one state. And then those who got it, even the list of recipients is rigged, because we're in a country where everything is rigged. Immediately their family members, their cronies, they get a gift bag. And some even have the audacity to put it on video, social media, showing what they got. You see, as they display that, I'm happy, because it then upsets the 100 million plus people who didn't get it. Even more impoverished than the recipients. So whether we like it or not, our income distribution problem has come to the fore. Yeah. So
okay,
go on.
Yeah. So if we take say the last elections in Abuja, council elections in Abuja, I think turnout was somewhere around 7%. And I think that's a direct feedback from the last 2023 elections, where a lot of young people came out to vote, but their votes didn't count. And so my question here is, if we're seeing these very low turnout numbers, and we're still hoping that the future lies with the large number of young people who would come out, but the last time they did come out, it didn't result in the outcomes that they expected. What is it that needs to be done differently to convince young people that that effort of coming out again and again and again could lead to a different outcome, where they get a government that may be more accountable to their needs? What needs to change?
Patrick, I'm not one of those who pretends to have an answer to every single problem. But because there's no need. Because so I can agree, I can join you in confessing that I think we have to constantly keep searching for that ingredient that will provide the spark and motivate people. I know you are familiar with history. Look at the Arab Spring. Indeed, come to Nigeria, look at NSAS. Sometimes you don't, it's one little thing. That is, people will take all the inconvenience, all the hardship and all. Sometimes it's one little trigger. What happened in Nepal? Things were wretched. I'm sure if the government in Nepal knew that the action of shutting down social media will lead to that downfall, they would have left it open, social media, and allowed the youth to keep on watching and tweeting and doing all the lot. But you see, but that's the way the cookie crumbles throughout history. What happens is that an insensitive elite or government will keep on taking everybody for granted. They'll keep on taking everybody for granted. They'll keep on ignoring all the warning signs. We've seen it in Nigeria in several ways, right from my childhood. When there was political turbulence in the Western region, there were people issuing warnings, but some were deaf to it. We've seen it, repeatedly throughout history. It's not everybody that sees early warning signs. And in any case, it's not always true that immediately after early warning signs, things happen. What leads to what I call breaking the camel's back? Is that you keep on heaping straws on the camel's back. Nobody knows who's the last straw that will break the camel's back. The single. If you know that single one, we're going to find the magic straw and put it on the camel's back. The nature of this animal is that you keep on doing all sorts of things, looking after yourself, looking after your elite friends, your own, rigging things, ignoring federal capital, and conspicuous consumption, tampering with the judiciary. You keep on meting out injustice or justice for only a narrow section around you. So you keep on doing more and more wrong things. Nobody's going to come and warn you that, hey, you better stop. In fact, the only warning that some of us understood from day one came from JFK, John F. Kennedy. He died, when I was a schoolboy. When he warned that those who make a peaceful revolution impossible make a violent one inevitable. That is the warning of a lifetime. And interestingly, when the cookie crumbles, people regret. The last time it crumbled, I remember NPN government, they were riding high, high fives, backslapping, announcing election results, everything. When the cookie crumbled, some of them ran to London. I ran into a few of them and all. And when you heard them talking, you realize that they never expected it to end. They were totally insensitive or impervious. So that's his human nature. Those who are riding the tiger will keep on riding the tiger. And all your warnings initially will be deaf. One day, one little thing will happen that will provide the spark.
Sure.
So don't ask me what is that spark, because I've already confessed I don't know it. But the only thing I know is that you have to keep on trying to produce that spark. Keep on trying to find that spark. What do politicians do? If the turnout is low, you can partly blame some of the politicians. Is it not the job of a politician to excite people and mobilize them to come out? When people talk about Donald Trump, they say, but Trump's base always come out. It's for you to get people excited. Now, let me say something that will surprise you. There are two things that bring people out. One, a politician exciting them, making them feel they must come out and support him. Or two, a politician in power upsetting them and annoying them, doing the wrong thing every time, ill-treating them. It could just be a day of one day, somebody seeing a policeman beating one youth mercilessly for doing next to nothing. And the crowd decide enough is enough. And it's spread wildfire. So when you constantly think you're immune and you can get away with anything, unfortunately, you start trying more and more daring things.
Exactly.
Until they meet your downfall. Don't ask me what date and time that downfall will be. But I will tell you that throughout history, that downfall will come.
Exactly. Let's switch gears a little bit. And this is a question I've always wanted to ask you. So it's around this debate between building excellent institutions in a bad environment and hoping that it changes the system, or focusing on systemic reform. So you built IBTC, very rigorous values, real culture, compliance, all of that, but within a Nigerian environment that was not particularly hospitable to any of these things, that you built within those organizations, that organization. IBT succeeded, worked very well, still is a respected, reputable organization, but it did not quite transform the banking culture. The banking culture, writ large, remained very fragile. You can say until maybe Soludo's consolidation brought that kind of structural reset. What does your experience tell you about, building this institution that may have all the core values and hoping that that institution infects the rest of society and society changes, or simply just simply trying to transform the society writ large? Where should one be spending one's effort and energy to get the most results?
I think each and every of us should try and do both. See, building little islands of sanity or little islands of excellence doesn't necessarily transform a country. It doesn't. Little islands of excellence all over the dotted in the sea of madness. madness, in the sea of corruption, state capture, is not going to change Nigeria. So you have to do the two. You have to do your best, Patrick, to build as many islands of sanity or islands of excellence as you can, while also finding the time and energy to address the broader national struggle that is talking about political change at the federal level, at the state level, at the LGA. Build all these islands of excellence and sanity. If your state governor and the legislature are a bunch of criminals, they will capture all the revenue of the state, which belongs to, let's say, 6 million people in the state, share it among 25,000 people. So, and let's not kid ourselves that the private sector can solve Nigeria's problems alone. Governance, you need good governance always. You need good governance always, so that we have to do both. Work on improving the systems and processes and individuals that we empower, whilst also doing our best to create islands of excellence or sanity.
And you've kind of done both, right? Because you've done, Stanbic IBTC, and now you're working on ANAP Foundation. So you've gone from that enclave institution building to try to directly, change the system. Almost a decade into ANAP, has that bet paid off? Has ANAP Foundation moved the needle? Or does the experience of direct advocacy make you nostalgic for just going back to the clarity of the boardroom?
No such thing. There's absolutely no desire to go back to any boardroom 100%. In any case, let me just set the record straight. I'm not 100% out of the boardroom anyway, because I own some companies, which are family businesses and are still doing their day-to-day
ANAP Jets and some of these.
Other things, yeah. But I think the point I'm making is that enough people, you see, all of us who are not in the midst part of that 130 million debt poor Nigerians, that is all of us who are outside of that group, including yourself, myself, and many of our well-to-do friends and so on. I think we have a responsibility. See, because when you are not poor or you're doing well yourself, you've got two choices. You can decide that, hey, I'm doing well, I have a good income, let me live a wonderful lifestyle, enjoy myself, and forget about Nigeria's problems, my state's problems, my LGA's problems.
Which many people do.
Which many people do. But so what changes a country is sometimes when more and more people decide that there's more to life than just making sure that I'm okay personally, financially. In any case, I keep asking people, what joy is there to say that you are doing well financially, but 130 million of your countrymen are living in debt poverty? Where do you derive enjoyment from that? Don't you feel ashamed when you see Nigerians scrambling to go to sneak into other countries to look for opportunities? Don't you, if you are successful, educated, don't you think it's part of your responsibility to do what you can to lift your brethren, your poor brethren, out of poverty? Look at China. I know you have all these kinds of numbers. The Chinese lifted so many millions of people out of poverty.
Almost a billion.
Until today, Nigeria has more poor people, total number, than China. Because China has lifted almost everybody out of poverty. India is lifting out of poverty. We are throwing into poverty every day. Sometimes we can say we want to be defined, have a measure of poverty and things like that. But we are throwing into poverty every day. See, we don't have 3% even. If some people will be enjoying that poverty group simply because they're unable to increase their income fast enough. So we're impoverishing more Nigerians every day. And that urgency to focus on that and reverse it and make it a priority is still missing. Not just with the government, but with the elite in Nigeria.
Yeah. So the question is, in your view, has ANAP moved the needle on this societal level change, more accountability, more transparency, better governance?
Let me just tell you what needle that concerns me. I'm not interested in the needle that the Nigerian elites define and how they measure it. The needle that concerns me is, Patrick, if I walk outside and move around the country, most people, you are the one talking about IBTC and so on because you're from an older generation. Most people don't know that I'm the founder of IBTC. They don't even, some are even surprised. I see it everything on the internet. Surprised that I was a banker before. The only thing they know me for is getting involved in public discourse, trying to do whatever one can to take part and mobilize people. So for me, moving the needle is defined differently. It's defined by the number of young people who tell you, thank you, you opened my eyes to XYZ. When we began Go Nigeria last election, do you know there were several educated, graduate Nigerians, sophisticated, some foreign trained, who said they didn't even know what PVC meant. That they were surprised they were hearing this thing called PVC. So that by the time we had spent so much energy trying to mobilize people saying, no, still go out and get your permanent voter's card, you have to take part, this is your country, you must participate and so on. Do you know, we moved the needle, not alone. I'll explain that if you allow me later. We moved the needle in the sense that everybody knew what a PVC was. Not only that, initially, when we began, it was politically correct for sophisticated young Nigerians to even at the party be bragging, I'm not voting, I've opted out of the system, I don't want to take part in, I don't care who rules. It became politically incorrect towards just before the last election for young people to come out and say, oh, I didn't bother to register. In fact, some feared if you said so, you'll be lynched. Isn't that moving the needle? Isn't that moving the needle? Those are the kind of needles I'm interested in moving. Getting young people not to give up on their country. That's the kind of thing I'm interested in.
Yeah. And, in fact, this brings to mind because after the Lekki, NSAS Lekki shootings in 2020, you gave one of these really widely watched interviews, where you told young Nigerians that they've been conceding their birthrights. It was a very powerful warning, right? But when I think about warnings, they're great, but they're not a mechanism for change, right? What is the actual institutional pathway through which, say, the energy of the obedience movement, which you might even call the obedient generation, to convert into like durable policy influence rather than just another cycle of mobilization, which may then be followed by disappointment? How would that energy be harnessed to lead to something that is really durable?
Part of what that NSAS movement and how it's subsequently metamorphosed into getting many more young people politically active was what converted the last election into a three-horse race. For the first time since we had this president
return to democracy
that came back in 1999.
Yes.
And so what was it? It was many young people rejecting APC and
PDP
and saying, we don't want APC, we don't want PDP, we want a third way. So what you're saying is that look at the UK. For 100 years or more, there were two parties, Tories and the Liberals. Then came Labour to come and make it a three-party affair. America is still stuck with two political parties. So that thing you are describing, that you're almost sounding as if it achieved nothing, helped to transform Nigeria from a two-party state to a three-party state, or at least to three major candidates. When we brought out our very first opinion poll, all kinds of illiterates don't read. Every poll we brought out, the result is still on an App Foundation website. Our conclusion was that this election would be a three-horse race. In any case, If it wasn't a three-horse race, if you listen to half the people campaigning for presidency, they spend their time, abusing or running down a third candidate. Have you ever seen an election where in a two-horse race, people will spend so much energy trying to talk about the third candidate? So by their actions even, they were confirming it. Now, let me tell you something else about timelines. When you talk about moving the needle and all that, please go and check the records. Peter Obi only left PDP just a few days before the deadline to come out and run on the Labour Party. Just a few days before it was already almost over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he is around and he's alive, and he won't deny it. Ask him to explain to you and everybody else why it took him so long to come out of PDP. I had my theory. I didn't ask him. I think for a long time, he too was not convinced that Nigeria was anything more than a two-party state.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, like they say, the beam has to fall from your eyes before you begin to see something.
Mm-hmm.
So he saw it very late. He saw it very late in the day. So some of us saw it earlier, and we're trying to mobilize and get people say, listen, let's create a third for the alternative and all that. I didn't join SDP because I was looking for anything in particular. I joined SDP and I told all those who asked me at the time, hoping to encourage people to come in there, make it a third party. And please, let's be very careful. If you notice, I'm talking about giving people a choice, increasing the democratic space. In any case, if the bulk of the young people were telling me that they were fed up with APC and PDP, in any case, APC and PDP had one thing in common. They had each ruled for at least 8 years. And so you can judge them and say they have a track record of failure. Yeah, because if 130 million people are poor, they're going to say that those who were in governance failed them. So the people were looking for an alternative. Now, does that mean that the needle was not moved? The academics will tell you that if you move a country from a two-party state to a three-party state, that's a major upheaval.
Exactly.
It's a major first step. Now, what matters is the second step thereafter. Now, I'm not a soothsayer. This time around, for whatever reason, on all those, I'm just using facts, the major candidates who ran against President Tinubu seem to have coalesced into one political arrangement under ADC. What does that mean? I don't know. Does that mean that there's been a movement of the needle? I honestly don't know. All I know is that things have changed from last time. The other thing I'll mention is that, in America, people say often that any kind of PR is good PR. Recently, when people were talking about this coalition, all these people have joined one party, ADC. Many people didn't take ADC seriously. Do you know what made many young people tell me, do you know what made them take ADC seriously? I saw something put out by ADC that the number of registrations leapt up dramatically after the perception was created that the authorities, under whatever guise, were out to make it impossible for a strong opposition to run against incumbents. So in effect, what am I saying? I think the worst thing for ADC or any coalition would have been if they were left alone. See, when they were left alone, they were focusing so much on, I'm the one that must run, it must be me. That must say it must be me, the other one. So in effect, they were focusing on the things that were dividing them. When you threaten them together, they focus on the things that unite them instead. And also, by giving them endless PR and coverage, almost every other news story every day, internet everywhere, ADC, ADC. People say any kind of PR is good PR, in the sense that all of a sudden, you've transformed what looked to be a flagging or not so sure opposition. You're almost forcing them to come together. And
exactly.
Yeah, because you threaten the group.
Exactly.
What you want to do is to divide the group, not threaten them.
No, you're right. You're right. And we'll see how that plays out, in the next couple of weeks. But just switching gears a little bit to another issue that you've talked about quite a bit, and that is at the core of development in Nigeria, which is fiscal federalism. As you know, the revenue allocation formula has not been significantly revised since maybe 92. The states remain fiscally dependent on Abuja transfers to a great degree, such that even the subnational accountability, where they should depend on taxpayers, seems not to be working. Yes, there are some states that have increased their internally generated revenues, but so many other states have not even started work in that regard. How important is genuine fiscal federalism to Nigeria's governance, or the solution to our governance? And how should that work in practice, such that it triggers the kind of, accountability, governance improvement, and development that whole argument, tends to present?
As if you're talking about this whole talk about restructuring the federation and all that. But you see, I think I said something in passing in an earlier question. So you need two things. When an arrangement is not working in the country, let me ask one water. In the country or in the company or in anything, usually you need two things. It's rare that's only one. Usually you need to improve the systems and the arrangements of how the units interconnect and all that, or how the departments relate and all that. And secondly, you need to improve the quality of people. You see, all this fiscal federalism
discussions,
talking about discussion, restructuring, comes to naught if you put some vagabonds in office thereafter. Because I've already said that what vagabonds excel in is state capture. It doesn't matter the arrangement that you put. If somebody told me that it's like putting meat in the mouth of a lion, and then you think you share the meat with the lion. If you finish up putting a lion in office and the revenue is going into his mouth, you put meat in his mouth, the meat is gone. So you have to ensure that you don't put you also throw up better candidates. So we have to work on both. So even all this talk about coalition and all that, I hope and pray that at the end of the day, people will emerge from any arrangement, any political party, based on their assessed ability to contribute and to work hard to improve the people. If it's simply based on who can gather or distribute the most money to get the most votes and then get into office and do the same thing that we're all trying to complain about, then what's the point changing government?
Yeah.
And now, before anybody thinks that I'm being 100% negative, anybody who has been a governor before, anybody who has been even an LGA chairman, if you can go and look at his past and his track record, if he was a thief, everybody in the LGA would know. If he was a governor and he was a thief, everybody in the state would know. He will take everything away for himself. Some would even put in place pensions that will pay them money forever and ever.
Forever and ever. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm not picking candidates for anybody, but I don't subscribe to this theory that every politician is the same. When you go to Kano and people not talk about one council, do they call him a thief? I'm asking you a direct question.
No.
Why
That's
don't
why he's got cult-like following. Mm-hmm.
Why don't they call him a thief? If he was stealing money every day, wouldn't they call him a thief?
Mm-hmm.
So let's not pretend that all our politicians. I just give one at random. I can take P2B. When you go to Anambra and ask to talk to people in Anambra, do they call P2B a thief? They tell you, let me tell you what they tell me, that this man was so stingy that he was not even prepared to give people in his family, contracts, this and that. He was all about. So let's not pretend as if all politicians we have are the same. tie
Yep.
everybody with the same brush. So I think there are different periods in the history of a people when the kind of leader you need, priorities change. Perhaps in 2023, the priority was who would come and take some tough decisions, fuel subsidy, exchange rates, throwing it open and all that. But those are things, Patrick, that you can do in 24 hours. You can actually move fuel subsidy in 24 hours and then just manage it thereafter. Same with exchange rates. I was a banker, like you pointed out. Do you remember the time when the central bank took the exchange rate from 4 to 1 to 18 to 1? Or when they took it from 1 to 1 to 4 to 1 and threw open the market? Those actions, you can do them first time. Why do they fail is what we should be discussing. Because you don't follow through. Now, how do you follow through if the people managing at the center are irresponsible or almost behaving like criminals? Because what happened was that's why we keep on devaluing and devaluing and devaluing. Because when you move from 1 to 1 to 4 to 1, and you think that the resources should now be used properly, more Naira revenue and all, people will show up, loot everything, leave almost nothing, and go back to this issue of state capture. So you find that the problem is not really solved, just that the numbers change. So what success comes when you carry out those reforms, that initial reform of exchange rate mechanism being corrected, having exchange rate available to everybody at an exchange rate that clears the market, and fuel subsidy removal and all. Plus, you carry out a whole long gamut, use those resources that you get, carry out a whole gamut of meaningful reforms. Those reforms.
In this answer, you tended towards almost like the challenges with implementation. And by implementation, I mean, both the human beings who are doing it, their capacity, their values, etc. Let me ask a slightly theoretical question. So in the last couple of decades, the reform program we've been running in Nigeria seems to be broadly liberal, in the lower L liberal sense of it. Deregulation, privatization, monetary discipline, transparency, etc. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's reforms, were steeped in these principles. We've run this now for 20, 25 years. The results are not great. Can we then say that maybe the problem is not all about implementation, but that maybe the way we've designed or defined the models that we're running, the philosophy that guides development in Nigeria may be wrong? Now, you may say that it's implementation, but if we're having challenges with implementing, doesn't that say something as well about the idea that we're implementing?
No, I don't want us to sound like two economists, then we lose the audience. Let me take simple examples.
Okay.
So we remove fuel subsidy. So exchange rate Naira is allowed to find a level that can clear the market.
Yes.
Then what is the very next thing you do? I thought you were going to now make sure that you use all that revenue most judiciously, carry out the rest of the reforms that have been held back for years, like the report of Orosanye, streamline agencies, cut out waste. What were we doing at the same time? We were buying luxury SUVs for senators and House of Rep. Please, when I talk about luxury SUVs, when the economy was booming, I said it earlier, when even right after the inauguration of the president, when the economy was booming in 2012, go and check. The legislators were given Toyota Camry. Then, now that we were in deep problems, they were buying luxury SUVs. Now, I'm not saying that the cost of one SUV destroys everything, but it shows you the mindset. So exactly. The problem I'm trying to get home of, you stopped me halfway. I was saying that the first shocker I got was all this luxury SUV and all that. But I honestly thought these people came to reform. If you listen to the campaign speeches, please believe me, I'm not one of those people who is vindictive. So somebody wins an election. I want my country to move forward. So the Supreme Court said, this is the president, we move forward. Before that, I was approached by Nasir El-Rufai. Then they had yet to appoint ministers. Nasir contacted me and he said, oh, he wanted to talk to me about the Nigerian power sector. I said, what is my own with the power sector? He said, oh, because you knew I was informed, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, what is your own? Again, other people know about this, so it is alive, so you can tell the story. He said, oh, that the president, or he has been told that he was going to become the minister for power.
Yes.
So he's even going to prepare to wait until after it has been confirmed, he has been to Senate. He wanted to hit the ground running and wanted to start doing some serious work. So
he had a technical team working on ideas.
My own involvement, my own story. I was even in London. I said, Nasiru, don't think that if anybody told you that, oh, I'm against this government, it's a lie. If what you're telling me is that you want to transform Nigeria's power sector, I'm excited, I'm available. When do you want to talk to me? We fixed the date, we fixed the time. I was in London, it was virtual. There were others he brought into the team. So basically, I was even excited that, God, finally, we have, because the government, APC government, I will send you media clippings, made power an electoral issue that they would deliver. So I was actually excited that, wow, even if I thought I didn't vote for these people, perhaps they're going to come and transform Nigeria's power sector in 3 years or 4 years. So I gave Nasiru my time. We sat down, we brainstormed, we brought people, everything. Okay, let's fast forward. You know what happened? He went to Senate, they dropped him. So I still thought, okay, since the government, APC government made power a campaign issue, if they've dropped Nasiru, then they must have some other arrangement. So whatever Nasiru and I brainstormed over, hopefully it can be passed on, either by him or by me, or the team he brought to the next people. Do you know, between then and now, I'm still struggling to understand the place of this government for the power sector. I don't know if you understand their plans. If you do, please just spend a minute to help articulate them. This is something that they made a campaign issue themselves. I still do not understand. Was it that they were not serious when they told Nasiru that he should come and transform the power sector? Did they give up on the idea? I honestly don't know. I wish what others would speak. But that's only one area. That's why I said that it's beyond exchange rate and fuel subsidy. There are other things. Power sector. Second thing, big infrastructure projects. I almost fell off my chair when they announced $11 billion for Lagos-Calabar Road. I didn't know about any tender process. I didn't know about any environmental impact study. I didn't know whether it went through a budgetary process, nothing. If you ask me, as an economist, what was the bigger priority? I would have picked the East-West road, spending 1/3 of that to make the East-West road first class as a top priority. So I'm just trying to show you that it is these massive expenditures where you're probably directly or indirectly taking the revenue you got from fuel price adjustment and all, and you're throwing them around anyhow in projects that I don't understand why or how power sector is not a priority. I don't understand why East-West Road is not a top priority. Instead, it's a whole brand new one that will take forever, that even the path is being modified as it's meandering left, right, and center. Then I already mentioned all this conspicuous consumption, people using 100 vehicle convoy. So you send all the signals that confuse everybody. So I'm not even trying to, I'm hoping that out of all this, something changes from all the politicians, whoever gets into the center. Even this government, I'm not giving up on them because, like to quote one of my favorites, every sinner has a future. Every has a past. Honestly, if the government will wake up today and give priority attention to the power sector, I will jump for joy. It's not too late. I will jump for joy.
No,
if care is not taken, we'll go 4,000 megawatts indefinitely under this government.
Interesting point of view. Just to say to our audience, in a few minutes, I'll open it up for audience participation. If you've got questions, please put it in the Q&A tab, not the comments tab, the Q&A tab, so I can pick it up from there, post the question and give attribution to the person who asked it. But Atedo, there's we've seen a lot of advancements in fintech around some of the companies that are beginning to use like phone numbers to create bank accounts and create more financial inclusion. Do you think that this approach could lead to pulling more people into the formal system? And if yes, in your view, how could that then lead to some, the kind of development we want to see happen in the country?
No, I mean, all those developments, they are very positive. I mean, look, you couldn't transform this economy with banks alone because the underbanked persons were huge. So I'm happy to see all these OPay, money point, all those, because even my village now, that you can't, most of the poor people, they don't have bank accounts. They'll give you all these. Yeah, that was needed in terms of inclusion, and they can do transactions, and the costs are low. It's a vital part of the whole equation. Unfortunately, like I'm saying, people doing the business are still hindered by the poor infrastructure in the areas of electricity, water. Those are things that we should have helped them to also put in place. So yes, the financial side is improving and improving all the time. But by itself, it can only transform a few sectors by itself. But there's something more has to give than that. And to just one last comment about when you were talking about this, what are we doing wrong or what's the model? I said there are two things that destroy every major economic reform in Nigeria: state capture and corruption. You see, when people are taking decisions, sometimes the motivating factor is corruption and state capture. So you are almost talking as if, oh, people are trying to do the best for Nigeria and the best for all of us, and something is going wrong. It's not true. Sometimes they are deliberate. I've been on the economic team before. I was under Yar'Adua. I was under GEJ. People deliberately sometimes want to pursue something that is wrong for Nigeria, but which they can make money from. And some of us would always fight them to a standstill. Yeah, because it means that they didn't come to serve. They came to steal. So no, every reform will be destroyed can be destroyed by state capture and corruption. So that makes you see, could Singapore achieve what they have achieved? Now I'm the one asking you a question. Would Lee Kuan Yew have achieved what he achieved whilst allowing state capture and corruption on a massive scale?
So that's a good question, and the short answer is no. But the bigger question, or the more fundamental question is, what is it about that country, that period, that enabled a Lee Kuan Yew to put together the right team of people to think and deploy the processes, systems that ensured that the elite worked for their people, which we haven't been able to do here. Is it in our colonial legacy? Are we stuck in this path dependency? Are we stuck in the system? What is it? What's the difference between the circumstances in Singapore under Lee Kuan Yew and what we've had in most sub-Saharan African countries, from independence to date. I have my views, but I'm interested in your views.
I'll give you the answer. I think you do not underestimate the importance of the ultimate leader. Never underestimate it. Look at how much we're all discussing Donald Trump every day in America. Do not underestimate how important the leader is and the direction he sets. So, okay, when we talk about Asia, we make it sound as if Africa is different. How about Rwanda? Wouldn't you attribute a lot of what Rwanda has achieved to the type of leader they have?
Yes.
Exactly. So the point I'm making, that's why I said it's not only about systems. It's about systems and the right kind of person emerging, the right people emerging. So you have to put your energy on both.
So let me push you, sir.
Yes.
So let's take maybe Botswana, right?
Yes.
They were, let me even call it luck, that they were lucky at independence. They got a set of people who, chose to midwife their commonwealth for the greater good of their society. But then, subsequently, all the governments that have come after that initial starting phase have stayed true to that same mantra. Look at most of the other sub-Saharan African countries. You may have had like maybe an Nkrumah in Ghana who had the philosophy and the whole of the ideas. But then right immediately after him, you had a series of bad governments, and then a Rawlings happened, and and so on and so forth. In Nigeria, you had the founding generation who, I'm not even sure if I would place them at the same level as an Nkrumah in terms of philosophy or in terms of character. But then we went downhill from there. So I understand that in Africa, we've had some great leaders, who sustained good governments, and, Botswana comes to mind. But what is it? What is the challenge? Why have we, as a people, sub-Saharan Africa, been unable to find good leadership that transitions over time and consistently builds up the country?
Perhaps what is missing is succession planning. Now, that sounds almost as if somebody has the power to engineer who succeeds him or who replaces him. No, it's broader than that. Even in a company, much less in a government, I think when you're a leader, apart from whatever else you are doing, you've got to throw up many people who have the ability to carry forward whatever work you are doing to greater heights. Some leaders are only, do some work a lot, but don't put their mind so much to succession planning. So I don't want to sound unfair on anybody, but if you build something, you want to be careful and groom people that will take over from you and take it to greater heights. Some of those countries did that. Indeed, some people say, let's talk negative and positive. Some people say that's partly why the Rwanda president is scared to hand over. He's afraid of what you described. But then the onus is on him to do what he can to create an environment where there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 people who are totally steeped, almost like in Singapore case, to carry Rwanda to greater heights and to put in place all kinds of institutions and checks and balances and make it difficult for those who wish to pull it apart. But, at the beginning, I confessed, I don't have the answer to the question. It's one of them.
Well, let me ask a question and see if you have an answer to this one, because it's it's in the financial services space. I think it was 2020, you boycotted a Central Bank of Nigeria event in protest, to the treatment of Sanusi Lamido Sanusi. So I want to kind of look at the CBN itself across like 4 governors, right? You had like a Soludo, who came in, consolidated banking sector and introduced some credibility to monetary policy. You had a Sanusi who came in, raised very uncomfortable questions about how we use our oil revenue. And then you have some institution, and then you have an Emefiele, who came in, and ran what amounted to maybe a parallel fiscal operations. And we can call it by different technical names, but we know what that represented and, the impact it had on Nigeria's economic trajectory. And now we have a Cardoso who, at least from my standpoint, is attempting to restore some basic monetary orthodoxy, some semblance of sanity to the bank. 4 governors, same institutional design, same institutional framework, but different performances, different outcomes. So my question is our core problem in Nigeria the institutional design, or is it the nature of the person? If it is the nature of the person, okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Look, Soludo, Sanusi, Cardoso, they ran.
Emefiele.
No, forget. I didn't mention Emefiele deliberately. They ran market-determined exchange rate systems that cleared the markets.
Okay.
So let's not make it seem as if we have 4 different people all doing crazy things. I repeat, Soludo, Sanusi, Cardoso, none of those 3 was sitting down in his house, collecting all the dollars, giving it to his friends and his various cronies and so on at 200 naira to 1, and they were round tripping at 800 or 100, what have you. So let's not pretend. 3 of them were, I repeat, running market-determined exchange rate system. The one I quarreled with amongst the 4 of them was Emefiele, and it's all on YouTube and everything. I had sessions with Central Bank at George Hotel, and I'm looking to dismantle this system. I was personally deciding who he gives dollars at what price and all that. So let's not mix up Emefiele. What you should ask is that, what is it about the country that appointed Soludo, Lamido Sanusi and Cardoso CBN governors, and then also appointed Emefiele CBN governor?
Mm-hmm.
So he was the odd one out. Let's call a spade a spade. He was the odd one out. He was the one that was running a system which no sane person understood. Okay, the other 3 were more conventional and were operating, respecting the rules of monetary policy and all that, and doing the needful as best they could. I didn't say they didn't make challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but let's not have a situation. I mean, I'm not one to shy away from the truth.
Okay, so I have a.
What happened? The difference is that Emefiele went rogue.
Yes.
The other 3 were CBN governors.
Interesting. I have a question from Atedo Peterside. He's the owner of Roving Heights, which is doing fantastic with their bookshops, spreading across Nigeria. And his question is, thanks for your insightful and candid views. How do we mainstream a utilitarian outlook amongst Nigeria's business elites to pursue progressive politics that delivers the greatest good for the greatest number of people? And this is not one that you're going to say you don't have the answer. So what is your view on how we get this Nigeria's elite to pursue a progressive politics that delivers the greatest good for the greatest number of people?
Did you say Nigeria's business elite?
So he said business elite, but I want to add both business and political elite.
I was going to say something. If he said business elite, forget about the business elite. Oil and water don't mix. Forget about the business elite. Oil and water do not mix. If you want reform, if you want a revolution, it's not going to come from business elites. It's going to come from youths. In some countries, it comes from trade unions. It's going to come from university lecturers. Anything but business elites. business elites that want to preserve their position, preserve their access to contracts, preserve everything. They are for the status quo.
Yes.
Even in America, please, I don't want you to think I'm talking about the Nigeria thing. Even in America, aren't you surprised how many businessmen sit around Trump and telling him what exactly he wants to hear?
Or the tech leaders who paid to go for his inauguration.
Thank you. That's what I'm telling you. So that's what I said. And I'm not talking about Nigeria alone. So let nobody think I'm insulting Nigerian business elites. I'm saying as a general rule, forget about the business elites if you're talking about political reform, economic reform in a meaningful way. Because they will be too frightened to get involved in any such thing. They're for the status quo, and they're looking for what they can get out of a system. And many of them are dependent on the government in several different ways. So okay. you have to look for change from some other source. That's why I keep mentioning youth.
Yes. So let me then add his second question, which is now focused on the political elite. And he says, what are your thoughts on how we can revamp our leadership recruitment process, especially at the subnational levels, to attract a new crop of public-spirited leaders?
One of those questions, I'm not sure I have the answer. But what I do is that we have to do something different from what we have been doing. That was why some of us invested time and energy to try and look for this alternative and all that. Because if you just left it to APC and PDP the way they were going at the time, you knew what you were going to get. But I think that question is what keeps this discussion going, and all of us here. But at the end of the day, I think change is going to come because in a country like Nigeria with the demographics, because young people are demanding that change. So an indirect answer is that it's got to be through actions that stimulate young people to try to play a more bigger role in politically. Because if they don't do that, then there will be no change. They're the majority. If the majority surrender, I've said it repeatedly, those of us who are above 65 and so on, we're less than 5% of the population. Why would 5% of the population be dominating 95% of the population endlessly? Why would they accept that indefinitely? And let me tell you how it works. Because now we're talking about, even if I can't solve a problem, I can contribute to telling you why the problem is as bad as it is. The only thing that the old politicians have ever done through my childhood is to use ethnicity and religion to divide the people. And please, it sounds like it's so obvious. Every day people fall for it. I'm sure, Patrick, if you're in a WhatsApp group, somebody can be sent just to come, one Yoruba person to just come and be sent to just go there and abuse one Igbo man. Igbo man, instead of the Igbo man to be clever enough to ignore him, he now replies abusing all Yorubas. Then everybody jumps in. And you look at
everything goes south.
That first person was sent. And it's usually build up to elections.
Yep.
They go to another group. There are Muslims, there are Christians. Somebody will now come, do something tangential to offend one or the other, and all that. So I think those of us who are educated have to tell ourselves that we are above this. I don't know the last time that anybody managed to incite me against any ethnic group or any religion. First of all, I don't see myself, I'm sorry to say, some Christians would like it. I don't see myself as the defender of my religion, to the point where if somebody says the wrong thing, that he doesn't believe in Christ, I have to be involved in a physical fight with him. I don't believe that that's my mission on earth. That's not my calling. So, but there are too many people carrying their religion on their a badge on their shoulder, on their forehead, carrying their tribe on their forehead. I don't know what anybody will say about my ethnic group that will get me start fighting, because my views on all those things have been formed long ago. All this feeling of superiority of your ethnic group and all that nonsense. My views on those things were formed long ago. Nobody can set me off against you by just playing tribe and
Exactly.
religion.
Exactly. And it's interesting, you know, if you have to fight and defend your God, I wonder how effective or how powerful that God is. But I have another question from Ngozi Nkwo. A couple of questions, but you know, this one is because you touched on it. If we can get 25 million people to show up and vote, it becomes difficult for you to rig that election or buy the votes, etc. So her question is, how can we educate the citizens and empower them to fight for what you have called their birthright, to vote their conscience rather than being swayed by whatever the immediate personal gains may be? And I suspect that this is probably one of the issues that you deal with in ANAP Foundation. What are some of the things you've tried in the past? What worked? What did not work? Where is your mind today on how we educate Nigerians to become more civic-minded and vote their conscience?
You know, one thing we did last time, Go Nigeria, the principle in my head, the philosophy was, don't teach people how to fish. Sorry, don't give people fish, teach them how to fish. So it's not true that we were instrumental in getting the youths to awaken politically. No, it was the youth that did it themselves. In effect, we tried to act as a catalyst, get the first bunch of youths, get them committed to a cause, and then they will carry it on. So and we did a number of things that were indirect. Take an example, we ran all sorts of competitions, even people to submit, to submit entries for comedy or music, things that were, but using the whole, using that as an instrument to mobilize youth to come out and vote. You know, some of the things that the youth came up with, some of the videos we saw out there were fantastic. They were the ones who actually now mobilized other youth through all those their own contributions. Because whatever we did had to be politically correct. But guess what? When those first set of youths were convinced, what they produced did not have to be politically correct. So they put in all kinds of things. I give an example. We could never pick a winner, a video in a comedy about getting youths to get their PVCs. And if that's the particular videos, the actors were too violent and all that, they beat up somebody for having no PVC. We couldn't pick that person as a winner. But some of what those guys produced on the internet was hilarious. They were, they sent the message home in multiple ways. Yep. So in fact, what I'm saying is that you've got to train the trainer. You've got to get an initial group of youth. We had what we called Go Nigeria volunteers. Young people that came forward saying, we buy into what you're doing. We want to help you to amplify it. So all they were doing in their own way. So in effect, inspire a few youths, they will inspire their colleagues. You inspire their colleagues. But it's not going to be 70, 80-year-old men inspiring all the youths. You may get lucky if you have a really charismatic, campaigner on the soapbox, who can get crowds to excited and all. But generally, you've got to find a way to train the trainer, get a large subcritical mass of youths, get them politically active, and encourage them, mobilize them, let them run with it. They are the ones that influence their colleagues.
Yeah. Let me ask you this other question from an anonymous attendee. He says, what if INEC decides to write results like they did in Rivers and other places? What should we do?
I've given an answer before to this kind of question. First of all, even Go Nigeria, we identified 4 major obstacles that threaten our democracy: electoral reform, insecurity, freedom of speech, judiciary reform. So what this question is about is that what if there's no electoral reform and INEC does right result and all that. You know, the last time around, people were told to go to court. I've said it and I'll say it again. I don't think people go to court this time. And you know why? I think our courts have behaved in a way that most people have given up on the courts. You can almost predict their judgment on everything, depending on who brought a matter. You know, people can leave a political party in the legislature, join the next one, and they will not be asked to vacate their seats. The courts will be there looking, playing all kinds of games. So the courts have, if care is not, unless there's judiciary reform before then, I think most people have given up on the judiciary and the legal system. So I don't see anybody saying they're going to go to court. I think the last major political player that went to court was probably, Edo State, Asri Godalo. And part of the justification, I think, why he went through it all, there was a new Chief Justice. We thought this could be a new dispensation. Don't jump to conclusions based on the past. And he went through all that. People watched everything. And I think the general perception is that it's a waste of time. It's not good. So now that is dangerous. Because what are we saying is that Nigerians increasingly, because they've so lost faith in the judiciary and the legal system, will increasingly be resorting to self-help. So which means that it sounds as if disputes will be resolved on the streets going forward. I mean, which is not what anybody wished for. And I wish our judges, the judiciary, was even a little bit cleverer. You know what I mean by that? You know, Patrick, you should have been clever enough to at least once in a while give the kind of judgment that surprises people. But they're not this clever. As soon as any matter goes to court, you know where they're going, based on who brought it. I don't want to name names here, but there's some people that anything they bring to court, judges will be sending facts from overseas, meeting at midnight, granting everything. You know, and if it comes from the other side, brick wall. So the judiciary has so convinced people that they're totally in the pockets of some players. So the only people who should go to court are the people who control those judges.
Yeah.
Because they don't know justice.
So you said you're not going to name names, but one of my former guests on this show, Chidi Odinkalo, wrote an entire book where he named names. And, the title of the book is The Selectorate, when judges topple the people. And, he was on this show and discussed it. You can check the YouTube channel for that conversation. But I have another question from an Afolabi Adejumo. And this is important because you kind of touched on, the growing insecurity in the country. His question is, there is a shift from viewing security as a military issue to security as a governance issue. And this is especially as armed groups in the Northwest continue to extract taxes and ransoms from citizens. His question, therefore, is, hasn't the state effectively considered its sovereignty in the rural areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think I sympathize with the question. I mean, I think one of the areas which I'm a bit distressed myself is initially the apparent insensitivity of the federal government to insecurity and the loss of lives of Nigerians. More recently, I think, with all the backlash after Trump and co got involved and so on, there's been a slight improvement. I'm talking about in terms of the sensitivity. I'm not talking about results, but at least, the impression was created before that. I mean, 80 people being killed was no longer news. It had been normalized. Or 40 being killed somewhere in the Northwest or somewhere in the Northeast or the North Central was no longer news. And there was an extent to which even the media, fatigue set in. If there's a story that 4 peasants were killed in Borno State, it won't make the news
at all.
It had to be 400, or it had to be a prominent figure. Now that is dangerous. That is dangerous. Now, I thought again that the government paid lip service to insecurity. Even all this talk that people have been, some of us that have been advocating since, you need more than 1 tier of policing, state police and all that. The action has been so slow. It's like they spent 2 years doing more of the same. Now we're finally with when everything is almost falling apart, they're now beginning to show a little bit of urgency. It's a shame, but I guess that's why we also have elections, because at the end of the day, these are the things that affect the electorate. These are the things that will make people decide exactly whether they want more of the same, and then.
Does it though? I mean, so I have a question here from Ate Berudugo, which relates to the last point you were making. He says, very big thanks to you for being an uncommon voice that you've been, through the decades. And he says that, it is said that that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Absolute power is often seen as the khaki boys, the military, but any system where leaders don't have strong checks from the civil society or the citizenry, that is also absolute power. And, we're stuck in it, except in his view, a messianic leader like a Rollins, arises. How best, in your view, can we forge strong checks on the excesses and abuses of authority of those in power in Nigeria? And this is my own addition to this. In light of the fact that elections are no longer a strong check on the politicians.
Again, I come back to my default setting of, we're describing problems that so far have defied solution. And I think that all we can do, most of us, is to keep on adding pressure and pressure. Two things are happening. We either increase the number of those adding pressure. I just finished saying that I noticed a reduction in the insensitivity of the federal government, some federal government actors towards insecurity through a combination of things. I'm not praising Donald Trump for dabbling in affairs or otherwise, but the beauty of the world is that the world never stands still. If a problem gets so bad, more and more people will get involved in speaking about it. So I encourage more and more people to draw attention and make noise. And all these complaints that when they kill people in my area, nobody shouted. But when they kill in another place, they are shouting. When they kill people anywhere, you shout as well.
Exactly.
Shout and draw attention. So it's no point complaining that nobody, joined me in shouting. Shout it at the top of your voice. And I also believe that insecurity threatens our democracy. It does threaten our democracy. So if our democracy is going to fail, and I pray it does not, one of the things that can put it down is insecurity.
Exactly.
When people soon realize that the government of the day is no longer able to guarantee security of life and property, then why do you have a government?
Let me see if I can get a few more questions in before we run out of time. And I want to go back to the Obasanjo era, because I think at least his second term produced some of the most substantial governance reforms Nigeria has seen, at least in this democratic era. EFCC, banking consolidation, Okonjo-Iweala's fiscal reforms, etc., etc. If I look at that period, it appears to me that the successes came from a strong, concentrated executive power, and at the helm of that, a Baba. Strong external pressure from the Paris Club that if you're going to get this debt relief, you've got to do X, Y, Z on the reform side. And a particularly determined set of people, technocrats, who were really focused on meaningful reforms. Is this the combination of conditions that we must have to achieve development in Nigeria? Or are there other things? Because it appears to me that in everything that we've tried, this is the combination that has worked. And anytime we don't see these factors combining together, we seem to falter with our development. What are your views on that?
Since you mentioned General Obasanjo, I would answer it as follows. I think it's a pity because I think if General Obasanjo was back in office today, I think he would have done things a bit differently. Because he would have understood that proper succession planning was vital. He would have believed less in himself and keep things under control because he's the one at the end. He would have spent more time on strengthening systems, institutions, putting in checks and balances, and all that. See, because there's an extent to which it's very tempting when you're a leader and you're in charge to believe that once you are there, things will be all right. Nigeria will not fall apart. But if you don't put in place the safeguards, problems will arise after you've left. And that's why you notice that many people, when they're not in government, they talk about all kinds of things like restructuring, they talk about transparency, accountability, and all. As soon as they enter government, they drop all those items. And they pursue the default setting of, running an opaque government and all that. But I think that what is changing is that things are now have gotten so bad. Things have gotten so bad now that the system is threatened. That's what that's. You see, in Obasanjo's time, when he was head of state, the economy was not that bad. There were much fewer people in poverty, so that things were not as bad as they are now. I think we're getting to the point where we are either at rock bottom or almost there. And when you get all the way to the bottom, something has to give. So I don't believe that change will not come. What I'm saying is that I don't know how it's going to come. We just keep on trying different things, motivating different people, trying to stimulate, various actors and all that. Somewhere out of that whole mix, change will come in one form or the other. Get many more people politically active in whatever way or form.
Two more questions. The first is, if you could give one book to all the elected members of the National Assembly and governors or whatever to read, what would be that book?
Perhaps I will give them Lee Kuan Yew's book.
From Third World to First.
From Third World to First, because it makes you believe that so much can be done under one person. Because I think so, as an extent to which some people get into office, whatever office they get into, and they think they cannot make a difference. So is that kind of book possibly?
Fantastic. Fantastic. My last question, what would have to be true for you to conclude that 10 years from now, that the bet you've placed on civic engagement rather than the private sector and your involvement in the private sector was the right way to transform society writ large? What is that thing that you're watching for? And if you see it, okay, we're now finally on the right path to develop.
I keep on coming back to youth. See, because to answer your question in a roundabout way, who is going to change Nigeria? It has to be Nigerians. So let's start eliminating one by one. It's not going to be the oldest people in Nigeria. It's okay. Outside of Nigeria, it's not going to be foreigners. Nobody's coming from Australia Nobody's coming from Argentina to come and improve Nigeria. So Nigerians must accept that improving Nigeria is going to be the responsibility of some Nigerians. Like I said, it has to be the younger generation. They are the ones that, if they make the effort, they're the ones that if they get politically active, they're the ones that if they refuse to be discouraged, they're the ones that if they insist on giving their oppressors exactly what they don't want, which is to be politically active, come out, do your best to take part in the system, choose who you want to lead you and all that. That's where change is going to come from. I don't want to make a prediction to start hoping that, someday somebody's going to leap out of a barracks with a gun or all that stuff, because to be honest with you, I don't believe in that either.
Yes.
I believe more in the one that's organic. When people decide enough is enough, and they now become a movement, or they become a major political force, and they're holding leaders' feet to the fire and saying, demanding that. That's the kind of change I'm looking for. So something real and homegrown.
Any last word before we call it a close?
I think I would just end by pointing out that if there's only one thing that people take away, let people understand that the root cause of most of the failure in terms of economic reforms in Nigeria are the twin evils I've mentioned: corruption and state capture. And but if people understand that and decide that that's what they're going to pay attention to, because somewhere without paying attention to those two, they will always destroy every reform sooner or later.
Thank you, Atedo Peterside, for your time and for just sharing generously, of your thoughts and all the thinking you've been doing and the action you've been taking to help build this society we want to live in. And for our viewers, it's another episode of Development Discourse, where we look to unpack the complex development challenges we're having in the country and continent and seek answers. While it might seem like we don't have the answers, a red bow around them, I think we've touched on many. And the key one I'm taking away from this is that the solution lies in engagement. And despite all the challenges we may face, we can't choose despair. Despondency is even a political choice, so we must continue to engage. And my key takeaway is, if we had 50 million Nigerians vote, it becomes too difficult to rig that election. So whatever has been the experience in the past, let's come out again, let's engage politically, and let's vote. Vote your choice, but definitely come out and vote. Until next time, Patrick Okigbo, Development Discourse. Let's keep building that society we want to live in. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.